It's a good day, friends. Welcome to Our Power is Within. I'm your host, Chasmith, aka Just Chaz, and I am on a mission to inspire people to take their power back and help people to realize that each and every one of us has a healer within our own self. When we can create an environment that supports healing and get out of our own way, we are truly capable of healing in mind, body, and soul. Whether you have been following along this whole time or if this is your first episode, thank you for being on this journey with me. If you could please take a minute and help me spread the message of empowerment, healing, and possibility, this would mean the world to me. Ways that you can support this podcast are by leaving a review on Apple Podcast, a 5-star rating if and only if I've earned it, or sharing your favorite episode on social media and tagging me at Our Power is Within. So how did last week's reading challenge go? Did you go with fiction or nonfiction? Did you find this challenge easy for you, or was it something new and hard to sustain? I love reading so much. I can actually admittingly turn into quite a book nerd and get lost in a good story for hours. My favorite is when I can just lay in a hammock on a breezy day and enjoy the fresh air while reading a book. This week's challenge is going to be a 5-minute morning meditation upon waking. Can you make a commitment to yourself to do 5 minutes of any type of meditation first thing in the morning? Now, if you're not one to normally meditate, no worries. Let's not let the word meditate deter us today. Think of this challenge as just spending 5 minutes with yourself in stillness and presence. You could approach this in so many different ways. You could turn on a morning guided meditation of some sort. You could just listen to the sounds of your own breath. You could, actually, this is one of my all-time favorites. You could get really quiet and then just notice all the sounds that are around you, both near and far, loud and soft. And try to notice the sounds without labeling them. You will be surprised how fast 5 minutes flies by with that one. What else? You could just notice your own thoughts and let them just float by and through you. Or you could even place your hand on your heart and breathe in compassion, love, and joy for yourself. Let's just make this about 5 minutes of focus and presence on whatever you want. The choice is yours. But I do think that waking up and starting our day, giving ourselves a gift so precious, is a really lovely beginning to the day. I'm excited for our guest today. She really speaks my language, and I hope that her message inspires something inside of you too. Heidi Hadley, creator of Total Somatics, which is an online program that supports you on your journey to healing through the mind, body, and soul. Though I have not personally been a part of this program yet, I am incredibly intrigued and would love to get into it. And I have also heard some really amazing testimonials from other people who have done her program and requested her on this show. Heidi is extremely passionate and knowledgeable in her field, and it shines through in our chat today. I really, truly hope that you enjoy this episode, and don't forget to check her out her website, sign up for the waitlist, and follow along with her on Instagram. All right, everyone, I have Heidi on the line. Heidi, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Heidi, for everyone listening, is the founder and creator of a program called Total Somatics. You may or may not have heard of it or been familiar, but my hope at the end of this episode is that you will have a really broad and good, juicy understanding of what this program is and how it may help you on your journey. Heidi, for everyone listening, maybe you could share a little bit about kind of your background and just how you got to where you're at and ended up in the position where you created this program and what you kind of do with it all.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I'm originally from the UK. So over 20 years ago now, I started my wellbeing business in the UK. But before that, I actually trained and qualified in the field of neurophysiology. So I came from mainstream medicine and I worked in the National Health Service. So my area within neurophysiology was working in the diagnostic field. So anybody with any neuromuscular disorders, they'd come into the department, and I'd be involved in outpatient clinics and that sort of thing. And I'd also go into theatre and work alongside the consultant neurophysiologist and a neurosurgeon in different cases. So it was a really great starting point, really, for what ended up being like full circle, coming back into the whole neuroscience field, really. So that was years ago. And then I grew a business in the UK, a wellbeing business. And then in 2010, my husband and I moved to Adelaide, South Australia. And so we've basically together created our life here, and we've got we live in a beautiful state. It's a lovely place to live. But in the meantime, we've built a wellbeing centre. We've actually literally built a wellbeing centre. So we've designed it with that feel and the energy that we wanted to create for people as they walk through the door. But the thing is, because I have learned multiple therapies over the years to tailor individual treatments to clients, one thing that I found was that there was this recurring issue that would occur. So, somebody would come in with an ongoing back pain. And as much as I treat them with all the different therapies that I worked, and they'd feel relief, they'd then come back. So there was this recurring issue. And this is when a professional cyclist from originally from Australia, but was living overseas, he and his mentor actually introduced me to somatics, which I didn't know anything about. I'd come from a stretch background, and one of my qualifications was stretch therapy. So I thought stretching was the answer to muscle pain, which as I learned over the time, is not, and science shows that it's not as well. But basically, they introduced me to somatics. And so I then went on to do my studies, and over about a 6-year period, did my trained as a clinical somatic educator, and then also my additional training as a somatic movement teacher. And what I found is that people would be asking these different questions. I'd be working with them and making these fantastic shifts and changes. But because I would run workshops in the UK when I'd go and see my family, I could see that this problem was not just in Adelaide, South Australia, but there were other people wanting to know. And that's why together my husband and I actually grew and created Total Somatics. So it's an online platform. It's a membership site. So people come in, and there's people from over 10 different countries at this point that are in the membership. And I'm there basically guiding them, supporting them, and creating real focus and clarity, because there's lots of information on the internet. But what we want to do is stay up to date with how people are feeling, how the world is moving and evolving. And I want to evolve and pivot and move with the members too, and bring them what they need. So that's why the membership has that ongoing support with me as I deal with questions and answers, and bring in monthly workshops, lots of things to actually focus what is needed within the membership. So it's been wonderful bringing that to basically help people to reduce pain, improve their posture, increase their mobility, and develop mindfulness so that they don't have to have these recurring issues of pain and other bits of discomfort. Because when we start dealing with the brain and how the brain is listening and creating habits, be it good or unhealthy habits, we can actually create some shifts and changes with total somatics. So it's pretty exciting.
I love this. So, do you still have the well-being center?
Oh, yes, very much so. And I've got a beautiful team that work alongside me. So we've got all different types of modalities in there. So that's why it's really important, because I have that clinical practice day in and day out. I'm seeing people. It keeps my skills fresh. It keeps everything going. And basically, I can share those sorts of insights within the membership too, because I say to the members, whatever's going on and whatever questions somebody asks in the membership, somebody else around the world is having that same challenge or that same eureka moment if they've discovered something. So I feel it's very important to keep that ongoing clinical practice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you incorporate some of the same tools at that center that you use in the program?
Absolutely, yeah. So with my clients, I do, and even with my team members as well. So I call the center a psychologically safe center. So I want people to feel that when they walk through the door, if they're a team member or they're a client, that there's that calmness and there's that stability. And when we walk through the doors, we are practicing what we preach, basically. So it's creating this total somatic mindset, not just for in our clinical practice, but basically in our lifestyle as well. So that's something that I'm actually really quite what would be very mindful and very conscious of in a clinical practice, because as practitioners we're very giving and we can give, and sometimes we can be a bit depleted. So that's one thing that I'm very strong about, is taking care of ourselves as well.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
important. I mean, especially because as a as somebody who is influencing other people's well-being and as a coach, it's you really want it to be like do as I do, like you want to lead by example, and so you want to be really nurturing and taking care of yourself too if you're going to also ask that from other people.
You're right, and the thing is that I've got beautiful clients that have basically been with me since I moved to South Australia. So they've watched me grow, and we've all grown together, and so they know me very well. So when there's been ups and downs with things such as family in the UK have been unwell and we've not been able to get back, or different things that have happened, as much as I'm fully present for them, there's little things they can sometimes tell if you might not be just on top of it, because nobody's perfect. We're all working on ourselves all the time. But I think that's what's really important, is within the Wellbeing Centre and within the membership, the big thing that I focus on as well is community, because at different times we all really need to support each other. And that's where I feel that community is really thriving, because we're all there, we all keep each other going. But my clients, and they're so beautiful that they don't realize how much joy they bring to my life every time they walk through the door. What I do is a passion, really. I just love what I do. So it's not hard work at all. It's great.
I can hear it in your voice.
Mm.
I really can. I have a weird, it's a kind of a one-off question, a little different, but you mentioned that you had a stretching background and that at one point you thought stretching was the answer.
That's right.
And you said you obviously have had a, kind of a reframe around that. And I was wondering what your thought is, though, then on yoga that really focuses purely on stretching and other forms of pure stretching modalities.
Hmm. So there's a difference. So for example, in my membership, I go into different workshops and I talk about the science between stretching and the process that we use in Total Somatics, which is called pandiculation. So pandiculation is actually the process to release chronically tight muscles. So when stretching, basically, it doesn't hit the brain level, whereas pandiculation creates a sensory motor reset. And that sensory motor reset is going on between your brain and your muscles. And what it's doing is actually a full recalibration of the length and the tone of your muscle. So what happens is that when you pandiculate, for instance, you contract a muscle and then you slowly lengthen a muscle, and you only lengthen the muscle to the end of its natural movement. You don't go beyond that and try and stretch and challenge yourself and see how far you can go. So you're listening. This is where it becomes mindful. This is the mindful part, is that you lengthen the muscle to the end of that movement and then you completely rest. And then as you rest, it's allowing the synapses or the connections in your brain to knit together to create a new movement, a new muscle memory. And then what you do is you repeat that contraction and that slow lengthening and release, and then rest again. Now, when you do that, you are waking up the sensory motor nerves in your muscles, which are communicating to the sensory motor portion of your brain. And that sensory motor portion of your brain is actually telling your muscles when to contract and when to relax. When you stretch, you don't create that stimulation to the sensory motor cortex. So what you're doing is just lengthening the muscle. But what a lot of modalities will do is go that bit further to see if they can go that little bit more. And when they start to go beyond the natural movement into a stretch, what happens is your brain has calibrated with your sensory and motor nerves in your muscle that at the end of where the movement stops, that's basically the end of your range of movement. So as soon as you go into a stretch, what a lot of people will experience is like a cramping or a spasming, or they'll get a discomfort, for instance, maybe in their joints after they've done a stretch. And that's a huge sign that you've triggered the stretch reflex. And the stretch reflex is a really clever little mechanism. And what it does is it protects your muscle from tearing or overstretching by stimulating this cramping or spasming to protect the belly of the muscle. And so, actually, when you contract, and then when that muscle is contracted and from a stretch reflex, you actually shorten the muscle a few percentage more than it was when you started. So this is where it shifts, and this is why the science, it's called pandiculation. The actual scientific term for pandiculation is called alpha gamma coactivation, and that's the power of it all. So for instance, animals, people will look at a cat and dog and they'll think they're stretching because they'll see, like, if you can picture this, everybody, you can see their little front paws on the floor and their little bottom sticks up in the air. You know, you can picture that now. They think that's a stretch, but it's actually the second phase of a pandiculation, because dogs and cats and other vertebrate animals, they pandiculate, they don't stretch. So they do a sensory motor reset. So if you watch next time a little animal, you'll see that they do like a little tremble. And that's the contraction. That's the bit where the sensory motor cortex in your brain is being woken up. It's being like jump started by the contraction that's being created in your muscle. And when that muscle is contracting, it's basically stimulating the sensory motor nerves, which tell your brain, hey, wake up, I want your attention. And then what happens is when you see a little cat or dog stick their little bottom in the air as they reach and they lengthen, that is the second phase. And then if you watch them after that, they either settle down and go, let's have a little rest, or they go walking off slowly, because as they walk off slowly, they're integrating what their sensory motor cortex has just recalibrated or reset. So either if they just settle down or they go for a little walk, they're allowing that integration time, that absorption time of the pandiculation they've just created. And that's what's really powerful, is that because of the stretch modalities, a lot of people think that you've got to be pushing and breaking through a sweat and breathing through a sort of sweating into a stretch, or breathing through a stretch, should I say. But if you understand neuroscience, and if we continue to allow ourselves to move forward with the pain science and the neuroscience research that's abounding around the world, it's incredible. The one thing that pain scientists are now talking about is bioplasticity, and we all know about neuroplasticity. And so this is where your brain and your body have the capacity to adapt and change all the time. And they do this because when your brain is involved, it's incredible. And you know, we were talking before we started the recording about people that may be suffering with pain, for instance. If you've got a lot of pain, the thought of stretching is actually quite confronting. And so when you pandiculate, you don't have to make these movements big. They could be a micro movement, because all we want to do is stimulate the sensory and motor nerves in your muscles, which relay straight to the software, which is your brain. And when your brain is being stimulated and when it's being woken up, then we can do that recalibration. And it's really that whole expression about working smarter, not harder, with our body. And honestly, I did loads of qualifications in stretch therapy before this. For many years, I was a dancer, so I would be stretching all the time. And that's when I thought that if you're flexible, it meant that you had healthy muscles. But I see a lot of people in my clinical practice that are like yoga teachers, for instance, and they might be incredibly flexible, but it doesn't equate to healthy, efficient muscle memory. And so what you'll often find is there's adaptations in the way that they move to create that stretch. And often there'll be a lot of joint issues because of the length of the amount of stretching they've done. So a lot of them tell me in their personal practice they do pandiculation, but because people still feel that they need to stretch and make things big and elaborate, they need to for their bread and butter, to pay their rent or their mortgage, they still have to teach the big elaborate stretches. But a lot of them have actually adapted and changed in order to accommodate their own neuromuscular health.
Yeah, you're speaking my language. I mean, yeah, you can create that like hyperflaccidity,
That's right.
like you can become very flaccid if you overstretch. And it's the way you described. I've never heard of pandiculation, but it
Mhm.
very much, the way you describe it sounds exactly like the type of practice that I have in my personal movement.
Mhm.
Um, which, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So basically, what you're saying is if there's anyone out there listening that doesn't necessarily enjoy the extended, long, deep, pushing types of stretching, but they have this mindset because of kind of culturally we've been taught that way in the past, that they're supposed to do it or they need to do it, you're saying you don't need to do it.
Absolutely. And the thing is that it is a cultural thing that, it's been it's pushed into us from the moment that we're kind of 5 years old and we're sitting at school and we're told to sit still, look straight ahead, stop fidgeting, all these sorts of things. This is when all these conditioning, these belief systems come into play. So what we're kind of taught from the age of 5 is stop moving and basically do this, 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 and this. So this is where that conditioning begins. So one of the things that we start to do is, as children, before we're sitting at school, we're moving our bodies, we're moving our eyes in different directions, we're exploring the entire world around us. And then we sit down and then we're immobile and we're told, look straight ahead. So even things such as your eye muscles, they start to get tight, and that we no longer have this beautiful range of movement that we had when we were younger. And so basically, what I teach within Total Somatics is that what you just want to embody and you want to start noticing how to move efficiently. And that's why within Total Somatics, although I have like within my membership instructional videos, so people can see like where limbs are moving and all sorts of things, the majority of the membership is about the audio classes and the workshops, because I want to teach people how to read themselves from the inside out. And the way that I move and the way that you move is going to be very different to somebody else. And this is where we move away from that comparison or being told to push hard and push through the pain and all these sorts of things, to actually getting back to being familiar with ourselves. Because a lot, I'm sure you've met many, many people over the years too that they've been through the system and they've seen all these well meaning health experts that give them titles and they give them labels for different things, and they lose their identity and they're kind of told conflicting information. And all I say is, let's rein this back. Let's actually find out what your amazing brain can do. Let's go back to finding out what your natural rhythm is, from your breathing to how your muscles are moving freely. That's where we want to go, instead of it being poses and how far can we push, and thinking that if we make it a really big stretch, then that means it's a healthy muscle. Whereas personally, and you mentioned as well as like things like hypermobility, some people out there do the most impressive back bends and all sorts of things in social media and other forums. But if you know what to look for, you can sometimes see that they suffer with hypermobility, which is a condition in itself where people are not able to read the end of their natural range of movement. And then when they can't, they actually put their joints under an awful lot of pressure. So it's all about coming back to ourselves and working mindfully. And I do think that's where the mindful element gets mentioned a lot. But the true meaning of mindfulness is to internalize and understand how we are faring day to day.
I like that. I really like that. Yeah, you're still speaking my language here. I cannot agree more with everything you just said. I am so passionate. I talk about it on this podcast all the time about really wanting to inspire people to come back into their self and to like have their own discernment, to not need to go, well, what do you think? Well, what do you think? Well, what do you do? Well, what do you do? Well, how do you move? Well, what do you
Mhm.
say is right? Like, as if there's this one absolute that they have to like follow, that rather than to get back into that their bodies, to get back into their intuitive sides, to trust themselves, and to like allow the body to guide us. And I love this idea of the audio that you have, rather than, you said, the videos where people aren't necessarily watching and trying to do it just right. They're
Mhm.
trying, but more listening and allowing their body to do it the way that it it expresses itself.
hmm And that's the thing, is that in additional studies that I've done over the years, I've worked and studied in neuropsychology and trauma therapy and things like that. So that all comes within my membership, and that's one of the things, is that as a qualified teacher in adult education, what you actually find is that adults have different ways of learning. So
Hmm.
some people are visual learners, so they do appreciate seeing those videos and that sort of thing. But because I'm tailoring the psychology bit to it as well, what you can find is that, and I teach this within the membership, is that there are different types of personalities, and the way that we are as an individual will also pattern tension within our body. So
Hmm.
when I'm teaching people how to release this tension, it's not just a mechanical exercise, but I'm getting them to consider their mindset and that mindfulness aspect, because you do find people are quite perfectionists sometimes, and they'll go, but I want to know, what about this? What about that? What about that? And I say, can we just go with the flow? You just trust your soma? That's what we say in somatics, which is Greek for the whole being. That's your physical, your emotional, mental, your energetic health. And I say, can we just trust your soma? Listen and notice, because it's got such intelligence. But what we've done is we've stopped listening to our entire soma, and we've become very cerebral or very cortical. And we're trying to, as a survival stress response in many situations, people try to think themselves out of stressful situations. And so they try and think themselves into making themselves better. Whereas actually, when we consider that all of this, there are things, as we sit here today talking and as people listen, there are subconscious or unconscious actions that are going on in our body now that we don't have to think about. Our heart is beating. We don't have to remind ourselves to breathe. Our digestive function is just automatically happening. Hormonal secretions are automatically happening. Everything that's going on around us, your brain is absorbing it, and it's filtering down what is important and needed at this very moment. So there's all these things happening that we don't have to think about, because it's the intelligence of our soma creates it. So it's really having that trust. And that's part of what I teach in Total Somatics, is educating people and empowering them. So when you educate them, you give them that knowledge, and then you can upskill them. They're empowered by that. And that's why it's the movement. I teach the mindset, the mindfulness, and then I also bring in outside experts from around the world that have also a very somatic approach to their clinical work. But I like to bring that so that it rounds it out more for the members, and they can see this theme of having this somatic mindset, but looking in different areas. So I'm all about, again, widening people's approach. And sometimes it's challenging belief systems. If people are very set in their ways about stretching, it's about teaching people. When you educate people and you show them the science and you get them to actually experience it, that's when you see the shifts and the changes. And that's really why I came into this work, was to bring this and deliver it to people into their homes.
I love it. What would you say to somebody who they love the spiritual side to yoga. They
Mhm.
love the kind of the principle of yoga, but you know that they're not going to benefit from the extended type of stretching. Do you have a specific then type of yoga practice that you recommend in those situations for somebody to get to still have a yoga practice to embody the more spiritual and the peaceful side of it that they enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, I personally feel that when we put labels on things like yoga or different things like that, people feel they've got to be pigeonholed into something. I kind of like to keep that kindness and that nurturing, and allow for that evolving and that pivoting to happen. So um, I'm basically more encouraging people to consider an overall lifestyle factor, if you see what I mean. It's like we can take spiritual aspects from different areas and create our own somatic or our own individual lifestyle factors. And there are many people within the membership that have come from a yoga background, and they enjoy that spiritual side of it, but they've learned to see how they can just adapt and change so that they can bring in more of a pandiculation approach, because that's obviously going to be healthier for them. But I just think overall, if we're looking at our lifestyle, it depends, because not, other people have got different feelings and different thoughts, and their way they view their spirituality is very different. So It's really up to the individual, and I think that's where, again, with me within Total Somatics, that I don't really want to be kind of getting people to be forced into doing these sorts of things, because we're all adults, and it's kind of just creating what you feel internally is right for you spiritually and emotionally and energetically. So people will, as they, as they learn, as they evolve, they will bring different facets and different aspects of modalities into it to create their own personal practice of whatever that would be. Does that make sense in
One,
that way?
yeah, it
Mm.
does. Absolutely. Yeah, I love it.
Because
So
yeah.
you said that within this Total Somatics online program, you include movement, mindset, and mindfulness,
Hmm.
and then you bring on also guest presenters at times.
That's right. Yeah.
Could you give some examples for each category for anyone listening?
Yes, sure. So I've there's a psychologist from South Africa. She talks about the mind and body connection, because within Total Somatics, I teach people about body armoring and that side of things. And so when she came in, it was beautiful because she blended the things that I've been teaching about body armoring, and she brought in about body armoring, and then how we can notice these different the feedback that comes from our body, and how we can release that repressed or that stored emotion. And then there's other experts that are talking about creating energetic boundaries. And then we've got other experts that are talking about tapping and how you can use tapping to release, because basically it's where we're tapping acupuncture or acupressure points, how we can release and create an increase of energy. And then also, there are experts in there from, like, say, someone instance from Hong Kong, and she actually talks about plant-based eating and how we can have this somatic view. And again, it's about challenging our belief systems and looking outside of something that we may have always thought was correct, but starting to pivot. And this is where I talk about we create our own personal lifestyle. She talks about plant-based eating and how that helps with gut health, inflammation, hormonal secretions, all sorts of things. And that's the thing, is that when people collect that information, but it's still within a somatic arena, and so we're looking at how this is going to impact us internally. Everybody's practice is so individual, and that's really what the power is with Total Somatics, is that everyone will have a different aspect. And that's what makes the membership so fascinating, for instance, because when everybody comes in and discusses, they've all got a somatic approach, but they're all coming in with a slightly different angle. And that's what keeps the community so rich. Because everyone's got their own spark and their own unique way, and that's pretty cool just to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, I have a couple of questions about all this. Where do I want to start? So, okay, you have the movement, mindfulness, and mindset.
Mhm.
Could you explain how like those support one another in a bigger picture?
Yeah, sure. So this is where, within a structured path within the membership, I break down these concepts. But you see, your brain, your mind, your body, your entire soma, your whole mind and body is absorbing everything day in and day out. So right up till today, everything that's been in our life history has molded and shaped us to the person that we are today. And so the habits and the postures and the movements and the mindset and the belief systems have become so automatic or so subconscious we don't notice. And it's sometimes those things that can be creating recurring pain. They can be holding us back in different ways. And so this is where, within Total Somatics, you can't separate your mind and body. So everything is heavily, heavily influenced. And so that's why I teach these three aspects together, because in my original training years ago, it was very much on movement, and there was a little bit on the mindset, but it was all about movement and that sort of thing. But as you know, as we grow, as we develop, as I continue to do my studies, there was a crossover, and you could start to see the mindset and also at times mindfulness, but not being sort of directed in the right way, if you know what I mean. So not always noticing mindfulness in things such as how we think and how that translates into our posture, or mindfulness in noticing how our mood starts to change and how that changes the rhythm of our breathing, for instance. And all these things come back to then a total somatic movement practice. But with that, we're looking and noticing, if we're fully present, if we're noticing these shifts and changes. And sometimes before we do a movement practice, we might need to just frame and get our mindset in the right sense, because we can lie on the floor and go through the motions of doing the movement. But if we haven't really done the mindset work for that day, because every day is different. We're going to fluctuate on how we feel emotionally and mentally. But if we haven't sort of addressed our mindset and looked at how we can take care of that first, sometimes the movements can be purely mechanical, and they will benefit us to a certain amount, but our mindset is basically, or the way and our thoughts and our emotions that day are still driving certain levels of tension and tightness within our body. So we go back into that loop, that neurofeedback loop, where the brain is telling the muscles to stay in a braced stress response. And so, yeah, we need to free up both mind and body. So there's ways of doing that, which I teach within the practice.
Okay. And how much, when somebody's in this program, what's
Mm.
the time frame of commitment that they usually engage in it every day?
So it's going to fluctuate. So when people are doing their movement classes, it might be they want to do 20 minutes of a movement class with the mindset mindfulness principles. There are up to an hour for some of those classes. So it really depends on what the individual has available. But my focus really is not just on the movement, but it's how you take those principles and the practice of total somatic movement, mindset, and mindfulness into your daily activities. Because remember, I mentioned earlier that our nervous system, our brain, is soaking in sensory information all the time. We are one huge sensory organism. So everything that we encounter during the day, we are being molded and shaped by. So because of that reason, you could do your movement practice, get up, and then go back to the old thought patterns and postures and the movements that you have. So this is why when I say that I'm educating and empowering people, it's getting them to take the principles and the practices they've learned on the floor or sitting or standing, wherever they do their practice, into their office environment or into carrying the shopping and whatever, all these different things, and how they are moving and how their mind is activating. So if they're starting to feel anxious or stressed, there are techniques that they can do. They don't have to be on the floor, but there are things that they can do to settle down, things such as the vagus nerve, which is very, very much involved with the stress response as well. So there's lots of things that their people are upskilled and they can take with them into their daily practice and daily activities, really, because that's where we spend
Mm,
most of our time, is on a daily basis in other situations, and that's where we're molded and shaped, isn't it, with our posture and behavioral patterns.
right. Yeah, totally. And it's like kind of how they say, obviously, a great start is if you've never meditated and you don't meditate, having that mindfulness practice. And, if you started with 10 minutes a day, that's great. But can you also take that mindset, that mindfulness throughout your day, not just
Absolutely.
that 10 minutes when you're setting time aside for meditation, but can that carry on in the interactions of your day-to-day life?
Yeah. And I often say to people, notice how you feel at the end of your practice and cherish that feeling. Can you take that feeling with you throughout the day? And there will be times that we're going to fluctuate. We're going to go up and down like a yo-yo with different situations. But if we can just take that time and try and recreate that inner calm, that centeredness elsewhere, then we know that we're starting to allow the nervous system just to recover if it's had to, because it's going to fluctuate. And we want our nervous system to do that because that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to be protecting us and taking care of us throughout the day. There's going to be stress responses that kick off, but what we want to do is have the resilience that we can come in and out of those stress responses. And so, it might be just going for a little walk, sitting on the bench. I always say to people, if you're sitting on a bench or you're going for a walk, look up, look at the trees and let your eyes move around, because when you move your head and you move your eyes around, you're actually pandiculating your eye muscles and your neck muscles. Because if you sit at a computer all day, your neck and your eye muscles get pretty locked into looking straight ahead all the time. So just the simple practice of taking a few deep breaths and observing and noticing the wind through the trees or the birds in the trees, you're slowing down your nervous system. You're pandiculating your eye muscles. You're lengthening and pandiculating your neck muscles too, and you're just moving away from a setting that is probably ramping up your nervous system. And use that time to create that inner calm and centeredness again.
Mm, absolutely. Who is your program ideal for?
Well, anybody that suffers with pain, anyone that's having problems with their posture and they're finding their mobility is getting limited. And even that, in my clinical practice as well, I see people come in and they've been everywhere. And they say to me, I've been everywhere, I've tried everything, and nothing's happening. So when they come and see me, that's when they're usually pretty focused and determined to stick to doing pandiculations and taking on the principles of total somatics because they've tried everything. So I'd say it's people that are wanting to learn, that are willing to learn, and that want to put that practice in as well. So if anyone that's suffering with pain, limited mobility, they're finding their posture is getting affected, stress is starting to really build up, and they want to know what they can do to release sometimes deep emotional stress that we've been holding for many, many years. This is where we start to unpack it in total somatics, and people start to learn how they can actually take back control of their life instead of these stress responses controlling them. So we go into many, many areas, but anyone that's really suffering with any stress, anxiety, pain, anyone with a brain and a body, really. So because we all need it, and we all need a reset. And pandiculation, I always say, is a bit like the software reset that you do on your phone. Your muscles and your organs are like different apps, and what you need to do every now and again is we have to update the software on our phones, and that's what total somatics is. It's updating the apps or the muscles and the organs within our system. So we all need that software reset because we go through so much, and the world as a whole is continuing to go through quite a lot of ups and downs. And so because of that, we need to create resilience in our nervous system. And so that we can just create that centeredness when everything else around us is pretty chaotic. If we can take more control of how we are internally with that mindful somatic awareness, that's where our power lies. We can take care of our emotional, mental, physical, and energetic health.
Absolutely. And so, would this be for somebody who says, "Oh, okay, this sounds really interesting, but I have very limited, energy or strength right now. I can't spend much time on my feet." Like, at what kind of needs to be their general fitness level in order to be able to do this?
Well, this is it. It's basically anybody. So there are people in the membership that have a lot of chronic pain and they can't do a huge amount, or they can't get on the floor. So this is where I've created audios, or we've created workshops. I've taught in workshops because I hold monthly members workshops, and I've shown how you can do things standing, how you can do things in the chair, as well as for ones that want to do things on the floor. But this is the key thing, is that they will be micro movements, and there'll be days, and I know this within the membership, there are days where people with chronic illness and chronic pain find it very hard to move just generally. So that's why I've created within the membership like vagus nerve regulation strategies. So they can do things with, say, their eye muscles and their facial muscles, which is going to start to change the state of their brain. And that has a long-term effect or an overall effect elsewhere. Because again, if somebody's in a stress response because they're in pain, if we can just quieten down the vagus nerve, which is relaying a lot of information on a stress level to the body, if we can do that, they're already starting. I don't like to use the word achieve, but it's probably the best way to do it. They're achieving something there, especially if they've been like a type A personality where they've gone go, 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 go. And often some of the type A personalities that have been go, 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 and quite perfectionist, they can sometimes in life encounter things like fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue, and it can really hit them. And so this is where within Total Somatics, it's about creating a new shift and a new awareness, because that was a personality that they had. And because of different factors, which I teach within the membership, so there's a real insight into behavioral patterns and how this shows up. Sometimes those sorts of things can create a lot of inflammation in their body and then cause some of the discomfort they had. So what we do in a very kind, nurturing, non-judgmental way, work with what we have now and how we can bring that resilience back. So you don't have to have like a big level of fitness, because this is all about rehabilitation, and it's about resilience and just bringing yourself back to fully understanding how you operate from the inside out.
Yeah, it sounds really like all encompassing in a sense.
Hmm.
How long do people usually do this program?
Well, because it's a membership program, it's just ongoing. So because the material is constantly is being updated, because I'm attentive, I'm listening to the members all the time. So if there's questions that are coming up, I'll create a workshop around that. If there's other questions coming up every month as well, I have live Q&As, but I'm constantly supporting the members. And that's the thing, is that people just usually stay in the membership because the material is updated. There's the ongoing support. And when people are doing their practice because the questions come flying in. And I'm thinking, that's pretty cool. They're discovering this in their personal practice now. And that's the thing, is that it's a journey, isn't it? We're constantly evolving and changing. So this is where, again, with Total Somatics, I'm there as an ongoing support for people. So that, yeah, I'm just on the other end if they need me, if they're in the membership.
And how soon do you notice that people usually start to feel shifts?
So that will change. It really varies on the individual because there's multiple factors that are involved there. But because you're working with your brain and your brain's doing that software reset, it can happen pretty quick. So sometimes after the first experience of doing pandiculation, people start to notice changes already. And that's what's really powerful, is that I'll say to them, your brain did that. When you start teaching your brain how to let those muscles release without putting them under pressure and strain, your brain will do that for you. So people do start to feel changes, after the first pandiculation, but it's just when they start seeing it happen in other settings. So they might go, oh, I went for a run, or I went to the gym the next day and I just felt I had more power in my muscles. And I said, well, we've reset your muscles. So now your muscles have a greater range of capacity, because there's this impression, for instance, that if you have back pain, it means you've got a weak core muscle. But
Mm.
actually, when I teach in the program how your brain patterns tension, a lot of the time it's because your muscles are chronically tight. So if you think about it, if you walk around with tense, tight muscles all the time, your body's going to fatigue quite quickly. And so when we actually teach your muscles how to contract and lengthen and fully release, when you go into different settings like the gym or running or carrying children or whatever it is, you then see that you actually have more power, you have more output from your muscles, because you've got this resilience. The muscles know when to contract and when to fully lengthen and release. So this thing of strengthening your core for a lower back pain, it's not the answer for everybody. And this is what people are finding, is that they just get tighter and tighter because all their brain knows to do is to hold muscle tension and get tighter. And when we
Right.
pandiculate, we actually teach your brain the reverse. We teach it how to release those chronically tight muscles. So yeah, it's going to fluctuate between individuals, but because we're changing the state of your brain and how it talks to your muscles, people will find changes quite quickly.
That's awesome. Do you have any examples of just maybe along the way someone that you've seen, like, not, you don't have to name a name or
Mhm.
anything, but just anybody that you've just seen, um like, is there some a way that people notice that they're helped the most? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if I have a free ebook. So if people go to totalsomatics.com and have a look, there's a free ebook. And within that free ebook, there are actually like before and after photos. So what you can actually see there is how quickly people's structure changes as well. So there's one young lad there that in his early 20s had very round shoulders, and his rib cage was very depressed. And he would say that he was like stuck in a vice-like grip. That's the expression he'd say. And the time he came to see me, this is what I was referring to, is that people have been through the system before. I often see them. And he said that he'd been to see somebody, and after he saw that person, he had to stay in the bath for 2 hours. He was in agony, taking painkillers, and he was in pain, he was crying, and he was in
Mm.
pain. So when we started working not just on somatic movement, but on the mindset and the mindfulness aspect, because there were things I could see that were holding him back and challenging him. When we started putting these all together, if you look in the free ebook, you'll see over that 6-week period how things changed. And I even describe in that book how his like rhythm changed. And he never got involved in sport at school. But when he would always try and say that he was injured, but now that he was in his early 20s, he still didn't do much physical activity. But when we started doing this together, and he learnt how his muscles move efficiently, he learned, I talked about spiral movements and how when one side of your body is contracting, the other side has to lengthen to make movement happen. He took those principles. And when I saw him the one time, he said to me, I've been ice skating. He said, and I took the principles that we discussed and I put them into practice there. And that was the moment that I thought, you know what? He's taken what we've learned from off the floor into his daily activities. And that's the power. That's when, people are getting that ownership back and they're starting to take control again. And then there's
Right.
another experience in the book of a lady. One photo was taken on a Thursday, and the second photo was taken on the Monday. And you see how incredibly quick her structure started to change, how her chest opened out. And she's a cyclist, and she does a lot of weight training work, so she's very tight through the front. And was wondering why she was getting neck and hip issues. But that picture, when that went onto social media, it went viral because she's very slim anyway, but she looks taller and longer. And people thought it had been like the picture had been manipulated or something like that. But basically, when you start to elongate the muscles, when you start to get the brain teaching the muscles how to fully release and lengthen, this is where you see the changes. And you see the changes in the way that they stand, the way that they move, the quality of their breath, the fluidity, because this is part of it, is that I work with the fascia when we're working in somatics, and it's fascia that creates elastic recoil. That's what creates our rhythm when we walk. So people always focus on muscle and think we've got to stretch muscle. But if you look at the science of fascia, fascia is resistant to stretching. It doesn't stretch. It works, and it only releases through movement. And that's why pandiculation is powerful. And that's why when we're kind of looking at neuromuscular health, we kind of keep up to date with the science, because the fascia is what's coming through. And that's showing that it just will not work when we stretch. It has to be through movement. And that's why we go back
Absolutely.
to the animals. We always go back to the animals. They've been pandiculating in front of our very eyes for years. And and that's where we just get our examples from them. They've been
Yeah.
doing it right all these years.
Well, I think we can learn a lot from animals.
We can. Oh, we can.
I think about that with the dogs all the time. Ugh, they're so perfect.
They are lovely.
What's your favorite part of what you do?
I think it's basically seeing people have those eureka moments and go, oh, like this. And it's the education, and then seeing how they start changing and they adapt, and then seeing how they embrace life again. Because the tears and the sadness when they come and speak to me either online or in clinic, initially they feel like they've got no hope left. Because nobody seems to, everyone seems to be kind of just looking at them almost like in a test tube sort of situation, very clinical. Yet if we look at the beautiful soma that they have, consider facets of what's happened in our life, our habits, our mindset, when we look at all that and we unpack that, we can see how much of that is shaping and molding and creating levels of inflammation and rigidity in our muscles. And so the one thing I always encourage people, and anyone listening to this today as well, is just be patient, because everybody is different. And if you see pictures in my ebooks of people that, before and afterwards, and you think, but that's not me. Just remember that when we're dealing somatically, we're dealing with our own soma, and we've all got different life histories. And so some things will take a little bit longer. We've all got different bone structures. Everything's different about us. So it's literally that journey, that experience. And that's why when you asked me earlier, how long was it like with the membership? I'm there to kind of figuratively hold their hand, as it were, to support them through that journey. And so that journey is going to fluctuate with individuals. But as things grow, like the members will know there are new features coming in very soon to the membership, and that's coming in because I listen to what the members are asking for, and then I'll create that to continue to support them.
I love it. What is your overall, overarching message that you feel you're here in this life to share with the world?
Um, I don't. I just want to help people. Really, it's I don't really think so much about my. For me, I just want to give and make sure that people are and educated and upskilled, and they have this resource really. So I just want to be here to facilitate people. I always say that I'm not here to fix you, I'm here to facilitate you, because everybody has got the most beautiful, intelligent soma. And when we have those skills, we really can just upskill, and we can improve our well-being. So I'd say I'm just here. I'm a facilitator. I'm here to support people along the way, but it's really for them to get back in touch with their entire system, their entire soma, so that they can enjoy their life again. So um, yeah, I don't really think so much about myself, to be honest. I always want to make sure that I'm focused on the client. I take care of myself. Don't get me wrong, I do take care of myself, but I really want to keep the focus on the client so that I'm attentive and I'm present for them. So yeah, I would say I'm a facilitator, but they do the work, and I'm there to support them all the way along their journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because I mean, ultimately, you're just helping people to realize and come back to their own innate intelligence
Hmm.
and their own self healer within.
Absolutely. And I think if that stays as my focus, it's like, how can I serve my members? How can I serve them? How can I bring what they need? That's my focus. It's really about pivoting, shifting, evolving, because that's really the principles of who we are as somas. Somas exist in time. How we are today is different to how we were 5 years ago. It's very different to how we'll be next week. So we're constantly evolving, we're constantly changing. So because of that reason, I want to pivot, I want to move, and I want to be present for my clients and my members.
I love it. What programs? So you have the Total Somatics program, but within that, is there different like different levels or different services, or is it just literally one option and that's what people sign up for?
So within the membership, there's like a pathway. So at the start, there's a pathway. Uh, Explaining the principles, the practice, the movements, but then as people develop through that pathway, and that pathway can be whatever timeline it suits them, because everyone's got a different health issues and time constraints, all sorts of things. But as they progress, there's an ongoing support section, and there's like the workshop section, and there's the lifestyle section. So there's all these additional bits to start deepening and broadening their horizons to that somatic lifestyle. So I don't say there's levels, because the reality is, and I see people, they've been doing somatics for years, but if they have like a huge stress response, a huge event that's happened, or we think of what's happened around the world in the last, when we're recording this, the last year and a half, um, people that have been practicing somatics for many years, their nervous system would have still taken a huge battering with everything that's been going on. So what we need to do is always go back to the foundations and the principles of total somatic movement, mindset, and mindfulness. So that's why within the membership, I encourage people that as they grow and they develop within their movement practice, always go back to the fundamentals and the foundations, because when you do, you actually start to extract a deeper level, another understanding, which you wouldn't have got the first time round you did it. So that's why I'm always saying pivot, come back and forth, go back into the start, and then again bounce off that and learn more from it. So that's the membership, and there's a wealth of information and skills and knowledge in there. But outside of the membership, because I only open the doors a few times a year, because the rest of the time I'm fully focused on the members. But outside of the membership, on totalsomatics.com, there's an online shop. So people can look there and they can see that there are a few audios that they can purchase. And also there's about 7 hours of content. There's 3 workshops, and it's about recalibrating and resetting their nervous system. So that's available to purchase. And within that, I talk about their power of their mindset, talk about their movement, mindfulness. So the concepts that we're in Total Somatics, they get a taste of that within that workshop. So that can be found in the online shop. And then finally, I've got a podcast. So it's called Somatic Movement and Mindset. And so that can be found on Apple and Spotify and all the podcast platforms. And if you don't have accounts with any of those, you can go to totalsomatics.com and actually find the drop down bar, and you have the option of listening to the podcast straight off the website. So there's plenty of opportunities for people to start learning about total somatic awareness, really, and practice. And then if they want to join, they're more than welcome to join the beautiful community, and I'll be there to support them too when the doors open again.
When do the doors usually open so people listening can kind of be aware
Yeah,
and on the
so
lookout?
they're periodically open. So what I've got is a wait list. So if people are interested and go to totalsomatics.com, they can click the Join Now tab at the top, and they've got the opportunity of putting their name on the wait list. And then what happens is, as soon as I open the doors to the membership, they'll be notified. But also, leading up to when I open the doors to the membership, I always hold like some live free events online. So usually, again, they're going to be talking about total somatic movement, mindset, and mindfulness. So that's why either way, if they just leave their details at totalsomatics.com, they'll be notified of those free events that are coming up, and they'll be in the next few months. They'll be the final time for this year, and then the doors will open as well. So if they keep in the loop, if they keep in contact by just leaving their details, they will receive, in some instances, once a week, a blog with my podcast. But apart from that, I don't bombard people, and I don't share their email address with anyone else. So they can fully trust me. It's not going to be going elsewhere. It's only going to be used for what they requested, and that was to find out more about Total Somatics.
Awesome. And where can people connect with you aside from your website?
So they can go to Instagram, and if they go to total.somatics, which is SOMATICS, so total.somatics, they'll find me on Instagram. And then if they go to Facebook, they can find me at Total Somatics.
Okay. Awesome. Do you have anything that you feel called to share that I maybe missed or didn't touch base on with you that you wanted to kind of put out there?
I don't think so. I think we've covered everything, unless you can think of any burning questions. But I think we've probably covered most things, haven't we? So
It's been pretty good. Yeah, I'm liking it. And just to reaffirm for anyone listening, you will open the doors for the membership again at some point this year.
yeah, so they're going to open one more
Okay.
time. Yeah, one more time they'll open this year.
Okay.
So stay tuned. So yeah, that's why put on the wait list. And even if this time round it comes and it's not suitable for you, they'll open again at another point. But what I would say is that when people come into the membership, whatever they pay for the monthly membership fee, it stays that price. So for the length of your membership, it stays that price. So if the membership price goes up when we open the doors again in the future, you will continue to pay what you signed up for originally. So that's a way of saying thank you for being with Total Somatics. So it doesn't fluctuate, it doesn't change. Whatever you come in at, it will always stay like that for the life of your membership.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here with me today and all the listeners. I could literally hear your passion speaking through your voice today. This is obviously a topic that you're very passionate about, very knowledgeable about, and I feel that everyone who joins this membership is in really good hands and lucky to have you. And yeah, I appreciate you being here and just sharing all this wisdom with everyone who is listening.
Oh, thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for taking time out to listen today. Thank you so much.
All right, friends, that's a wrap. Isn't Heidi truly wonderful? If you did enjoy this episode today, please consider sharing it with a friend on your social media platform. And if you have a story or message that you want to share, let's connect. Don't forget to start your day with the gift of presence and yourself for 5 minutes. And until next time, make this week great.